It begins as a reflex. The moment someone questions you, accuses you, or twists your words, your instincts demand one thing: explain yourself, defend your name, prove you're good. But that urge to defend is not strength, it's exposure. In the eyes of power, defense is confession, because only the insecure scramble to justify their existence, and only the weak believe truth will protect them. You are taught that if you speak your side, people will understand. But that's not how social psychology works. The more you talk, the less they believe. The louder you protest, the more guilt you signal. People don't process logic. They read posture, and defense is a posture of submission. It's not what you say. It's the fact that you're saying anything. You feel it every time someone questions you. That sting of disbelief, that jolt of panic that someone might misunderstand you, judge you, or worse, believe a lie about you, and instantly your mind scrambles. You start explaining. You list your reasons. You tell them who you are, what you meant, why they're wrong. But they're not listening to your reasons. They're watching your body collapse. They're seeing the shift from calm to chaos. And whether you realize it or not, you've already lost, because you thought their words were the attack. But your reaction was the real weapon, the one that stabbed your reputation from the inside out. Defensiveness is not a shield, it's a spotlight. And the moment you step into it, everything about you starts glowing with weakness. Your tone becomes apologetic. Your words get longer. Your energy leaks out, and the room doesn't see an honest person fighting for clarity. It sees a guilty person performing damage control. Never attempt to win by defending, Machiavelli warned. For defense is seen as surrender by those who understand power. You thought you were proving your innocence, but all they heard was your fear of being seen as guilty. That's the brutality of human perception. It doesn't care about your truth. It scans your posture, it reads your voice, and it decides in the first few seconds whether you're someone who commands the moment or someone owned by it. If you had paused, if you had smiled, if you had said nothing, their doubt might have grown louder, but so would your mystery. Silence is unnerving. It doesn't chase approval. It doesn't beg for understanding. It just sits there, daring others to fill the void. And in that discomfort, power is born. But your instincts betray you. You were trained to fix every misunderstanding, to clear up confusion, to make yourself likable. And you don't realize what that training did. It robbed you of your sharpness. It turned you into a fixer instead of a force. Every time you explain yourself to someone who doesn't deserve it, you reinforce their power. You tell them their judgment matters more than your silence. And the longer you talk, the more permission you give them to keep doubting you. You don't need to defend yourself to people who misunderstand you on purpose. You don't need to protect your name from those who smear it behind your back. And you certainly don't need to explain your truth to anyone who treats your voice like noise. There's a darker path, one that feels cruel at first, until you realize it's the only one that works. Say less, say nothing. Let their accusations echo unanswered. Let their discomfort twist in the silence you leave behind, because nothing shakes a liar like the person who doesn't flinch when called one. The next time you're attacked, don't react. Look at them. Hold the silence like a weapon. Let your stillness suffocate their performance. And if you must speak, say only what can't be argued with. One sentence, flat tone, absolute stillness. Because power doesn't explain itself. Power observes. Power calculates. Power burns everything that asks it to shrink. And if you want to be untouchable, you must stop proving you're good. You must start showing you're unbothered. In the theater of human interaction, Accusations are rarely about truth. They are performances, psychological traps designed to force movement. The one who moves first loses. Defending oneself may seem noble, but it concedes the frame. And in social combat, frame is power. Once surrendered, recovery is nearly impossible. The moment they challenge you, your body tenses, your breath shortens, and somewhere beneath your skin, an invisible pressure begins to rise. The instinct to speak, to explain, to clear your name. But the second you do, they win, because when you defend, you validate. You step onto their stage, read from their script, and play the part they cast for you. You become the thing they named you, not because it's true, but because you reacted. That's how frame works. It isn't about fact. It's about control. You think if you speak well enough, with just the right blend of truth and tone, the room will tilt in your favor. But it doesn't. It tightens. The more you talk, the more you sound unsure. The more you justify, the more you look guilty. The crowd doesn't see your words. They see your position. And it's beneath the one who accused you. He who seeks to justify himself exposes himself. Nardi adiachil. And now every sentence you utter sounds like a plea, not a declaration. You're no longer holding the room. You're begging it to believe you. You don't realize it at first. It feels like control, but you're not leading the situation. You're responding to it. You're no longer the architect of perception. You're the product of someone else's frame. And now, your energy becomes reactive. Your mind races to counter, explain, repair. But all they hear is noise. All they see is movement. And movement, in the eyes of power, is panic. The silent figure standing still will always look stronger than the one scrambling to be understood. You weren't trying to submit. You thought you were fighting back. But in their game, there is no neutral ground. The moment you engage on their terms, you've lost elevation. You're speaking from below, and once you occupy the defensive position, your words become irrelevant. It's not what you say. It's that you're saying anything at all. Power isn't about clarity. It's about control of context. And when they own the context, they own you. If you had stayed still, they would have filled the silence with doubt. If you had looked through them instead of at them, their confidence would have cracked. But you spoke. You flinched. You stepped into their gravity and got swallowed. You thought truth was protection. It isn't. Truth is just another tool. And in the wrong hands, it can be used to bury you. The only real defense is to own the frame. And sometimes, the only way to win is not to answer at all. In a social environment obsessed with clarity, ambiguity becomes a threat. People are conditioned to seek explanation, to force closure. They are deeply disturbed by uncertainty, by the presence of something they cannot label or control. And that is why silence is power. Not because it conceals the truth, but because it removes their ability to define it. The one who explains less is feared more. You've felt the itch, that clawing urge to correct them, to justify, to speak up and set the record straight. But what you haven't realized is that every word you speak in defense becomes a thread they can pull. Every explanation is a confession that you care. And when you care too visibly, you shrink. You reveal your desperation for control. You reveal your need to be seen the right way. But power isn't about being understood. It's about being beyond interpretation. The wise man does not declare his intentions, nor does he explain his silence. And in that void, others project fear, envy, suspicion. everything but dominance. Because dominance doesn't beg to be known. It dares to remain unreadable. The silence hurts. Not them, but you. It burns in your throat like withheld oxygen. You crave the release, the catharsis of explanation. But you need to understand something. The longer you sit in that discomfort, the more they feel it. Not you, them. They start to question themselves. They start to wonder what you know that they don't. Your stillness becomes a mirror, and in that mirror, they see their own noise, their own weakness. You haven't lost control. You've just refused to perform, and that refusal is control. Silence unsettles people because it denies them closure. They want your words because they want your energy. They want to pull you into their tempo, their frame. But when you stay quiet, they are left circling, guessing, inventing meanings. You haven't given them a handle. You haven't given them shape. And so they inflate you. They begin to believe you know more than you do, or that your silence holds some devastating truth. That's the trick. You let them create their own fear, and fear gives you scale. Not truth, not explanation. Fear. Eventually, you'll realize something terrifying. You never needed to explain. You only wanted to. And that desire, that weakness for being seen clearly, has cost you presence. Presence is not loud. It is not eager. It is not defensive. Presence is the quiet weight that fills a room without speaking. And the ones who carry it never waste it on explanation. In every power dynamic, the real test is never about truth. It's about response. Accusations, criticisms, and subtle provocations don't arise to be resolved. They arise to measure who controls the frame. The one who reacts has already lost their grip on the moment, and the one who watches owns it. They don't want to see if you're guilty. They want to see if you'll flinch. The second you start defending yourself, you expose your inner architecture, where you're unsure, where you're soft, where your mask cracks under pressure. You reveal what matters to you, and more dangerously, you reveal what scares you. That's the real game. Not justice, not truth, but leverage. They push to see how far you bend. They prod to see when you break. And when you rush to prove them wrong, they already know they're right about one thing, that they can move you. You think you're clarifying, but you're submitting. Every word you speak becomes rope they wrap around your neck. Because when you explain yourself, you enter their language, their assumptions, their timing, and worst of all, their story. You accept their frame, and now you're trapped inside it. Niccolo Machiavelli once warned, "He who seeks to justify himself shows weakness, for the strong are above the need to explain." The moment you explain, you've lowered yourself to the level of defense. And defense is the body language of the inferior. Notice how they escalate when you respond. Notice how their tone grows confident, how their eyes sharpen. It's not because they're right. It's because they've found control. Your voice becomes their proof of dominance. Your explanation becomes their entertainment, because now they're conducting you like a puppet, pulling strings just to watch you dance. They know exactly which buttons to press, and they press them harder. The more animated you become, they don't need to be right. They only need to keep you reacting. But when you remain still, when your expression doesn't shift, something breaks. And it's not you, it's their certainty. The silence disrupts their rhythm. The lack of defense short-circuits their plan. When you offer nothing, they receive everything. Their own projection, their own insecurity, their own spinning thoughts reflected back at them like a mirror too clean to lie. That's when they falter, because they have no script for your silence. The tactic isn't to resist louder, it's to become unreadable. You don't meet fire with fire. You let it burn out in the absence of oxygen. You ask short questions. You nod with a smile that says nothing. You keep your hands still. You keep your breathing slow. You don't hide emotion. You become the absence of it, the still void that reflects their chaos back at them until they choke on their own noise. The most powerful form of control is not domination, it's detachment. When you detach, their words echo in a vacuum. Their accusations fall flat, unanswered, unimportant. And in that silence, they reveal more than you ever could. They show their need to control, their craving for validation, their addiction to response. You, on the other hand, remain the question they can't answer, and the silence they can't escape. In every social hierarchy, there is a game beneath the conversation. The one who speaks less often holds more power. The one who delays response creates more tension, and the one who shows no emotion becomes the mirror in which others unravel. In this silent asymmetry, dominance is never declared, it is implied. You feel the pressure to explain yourself, to fix the misunderstanding, to prove your innocence. That's the trap, because in your urgency to clarify, you reveal need. And once they sense your need for approval, for harmony, for being seen as good, they own you. The cold shoulder isn't passive. It's an active refusal to play their game. You starve them of validation. You force them to sit alone with their accusations. And in that silence, their confidence cracks. Every time you speak, you give them a target. But when you remain silent, they turn on themselves. Their words loop back with no resolution. Their narrative spins without confirmation. They search your face for clues and find none. They test you for weakness and find stillness. That's the Machiavellian position. Elevated, untouchable, calm. Niccolo Machiavelli once observed that it is better to be feared than loved when one cannot be both, and nothing is feared more than indifference, not rage, not argument, just quiet control. Silence makes them feel exposed. Their accusations linger in the air unanswered, growing heavier by the second, and you, by saying nothing, force them to speak more, to over-explain, overreach, and eventually reveal their own instability. It's not your words that destroy their frame. It's their desperation to fill your silence. Your lack of response becomes the most deafening message because it says, I am not moved by you. And that stings more than any insult. You don't retreat. You absorb. You don't engage. You observe. You don't react. You position. This is the power of the princely silence. Not to be blank, but to be unreadable. Not to hide weakness, but to expose theirs. And in doing so, you alter the balance without touching the board. Let them speak. Let them spiral. Let them flood the space with their panic. And you just watch. One glance, one pause, one moment of absolute stillness can collapse their entire illusion of control. That's how the cold shoulder works. Not as punishment, but as a mirror. You don't block them out. You reflect them back, louder, clearer, and more painfully than words ever could. Because the moment they realize they're talking to a wall, they also realize they're the only one performing, and the audience, the one they want a reaction from, isn't even in the room anymore. In human interaction, explanation is often confused with clarity, but beneath it lies a pattern of submission. The one who constantly defends himself slowly forfeits power. Each justification becomes a concession. Over time, this need to be understood becomes a psychological chain. Invisible, but heavy. It does not strengthen identity. It erodes it. You feel it every time you open your mouth just to be seen, the right way, that little panic, the fear that someone will misunderstand you. So you rush to clarify, to soften, to rephrase. And in that moment, something inside you bends because your value stops coming from who you are and starts coming from how well you're received. You become addicted to being interpreted correctly. And the more addicted you become, the more fragile you are when people stop caring. It starts subtly. You explain to avoid conflict. You explain to be liked. You explain because silence feels too dangerous. But eventually, you don't even notice it anymore. You preemptively defend yourself before there's even an accusation. You shrink your decisions to fit their approval. You become fluent in self-justification. And in the process, you forget how to simply act. This isn't humility, it's self-erasure. Every time you defend who you are, you reinforce the idea that your identity is up for debate. You invite scrutiny. You train people to expect a reason before you speak, before you move, before you exist. And worst of all, you train yourself to believe that permission is part of power. But it isn't. Power doesn't ask. It doesn't explain. It operates. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this when he wrote that men should be either caressed or annihilated, because halfway measures breed weakness. If you must justify yourself, you have already chosen to be small. The crowd doesn't admire explanation. It devours it. The more you try to be understood, the more you feed their power over you. You think you're building connection, but you're only feeding their judgment. And when the tide turns, when approval fades, you will collapse, not because you were attacked, but because your sense of self was never yours to begin with. It belonged to their applause. You want to be respected? Stop over-explaining. Make a decision and let it sit. Walk away without justification. Say no without decoration. Hold your silence when questioned. At first, it will feel brutal, like you're abandoning your humanity. But what you're really abandoning is dependency. Because every time you choose not to explain, you rebuild something primitive inside you, the ability to act without being allowed. Let them misunderstand. Let them speculate. Let the silence make them uncomfortable. You do not owe your thoughts to people who weaponize your clarity. You do not need to be interpreted to be real. And once you understand this, truly understand it, your power becomes clean again, quiet, unshakable, and for the first time, entirely your own. Most people cling to identity as a shield, constantly expressing, explaining, clarifying, believing that communication will protect them. But this instinct becomes a trap. The more one tries to be seen, the more one is shaped by the eyes that watch. In the pursuit of being understood, power is lost, not taken, but surrendered. You've spent your life trying to be clear, haven't you? Hoping that if they just understood your heart, they'd respect it. If they knew your reasons, they wouldn't judge you. You defend yourself with honesty, with vulnerability, but all it does is make you easier to map, easier to disarm, easier to control, because now they know where your pride lives. They know what words will make you flinch. You thought you were connecting, but you were only making yourself readable. There comes a point when you must choose. You can keep explaining yourself into irrelevance, or you can stop, not out of bitterness, but evolution. The most feared people are not the loudest. They are the ones no one can predict, the ones who say little, the ones who act and then vanish. There's no explanation, no apology, just clean surgical motion. Niccolò Machiavelli once said that the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. But when you speak less, when you move without warning, you become both. You don't need to win arguments anymore. That's for men who still think power is about being right. It isn't. Real power is presence. It's the feeling others get when you enter a room and don't need anything from them. No attention, no agreement, no safety, just existence. Sharp, silent, complete. That's what terrifies them, because they don't know what you'll do next, and people fear what they cannot read. Let them make assumptions. Let them talk. Let them create their own theories about you. Their noise is their weakness, but your silence, that's your blade. The less you say, the less they can use. And when you finally do speak, they listen. Not because they care, but because they're conditioned. You've trained them by scarcity. Your restraint makes every word a threat, every movement a decision, every silence a sentence. Do not clarify. Do not chase understanding. Let misunderstanding protect you. Let it guard your power. Because when you abandon the need to be perceived correctly, you become untouchable, not invincible, but unreadable. And what can't be read can't be predicted. What can't be predicted can't be stopped. You don't need to be believed anymore, only obeyed. You don't need to be liked, only remembered. And in the end, they'll call you ruthless, cold, inhuman. But what they're really saying is that you stopped dancing for their comfort. And once you stop dancing, once you stop explaining, you start ruling.